Corbic V2. This is a super safe and effective natural anabolic. Not only is this product going to help you increase protein synthesis, which basically means muscle recovery and growth, it also may inhibit myostatin, which is a protein in your body that is known to inhibit muscle growth. This is a complete natural anabolic that works through multiple different pathways, has multiple trademarked ingredients. If you are a natural athlete looking for that edge, Corbic V2 is what you need. Get yourself some.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the code that is the Pro Physique. Today we're going to talk about when it's time to get aggressive and when it's time to take a mother effing day off, right, Lexi?
Yes,
This is
I feel like this has been a topic that I've gotten that somebody's requested before. So that's why I thought it would be a good idea to talk about it, because after all, I feel like we would not have jobs if getting stage lean was as easy as just pushing, even when you hit those plateaus.
so I mean, I'm going to love this topic because I feel like, people will ask, I've been full-time coaching competitors a lot, not full-time for a few years, but coaching now for 11 or 12 years. And I'll say the one thing that is most difficult for athletes is to not put themselves in the grinder, right? Evan, you coached yourself last year. Looking back in hindsight, would you say, yeah, probably should have pulled back a day or two here or there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did a pretty good job pulling back up until the very end. I think I pushed a little too hard the last week on things, but I'm pretty proud of how I did pull myself back on it. And I think part of that was due to the relationship I had at the time. She was competing a lot, so we would do the post-show meals together, and I kind of used that as my refueling every week. But it was all structured in that standpoint on things. I mean, I never pushed cardio hard, right? Like I did it all without cardio. So I think the biggest thing that I needed to do was not push as hard at the end with it. But if I hadn't coached so many people through this and I hadn't had good coaches in my past, I absolutely think I probably would have pushed, too hard.
For sure. And I think this is where context really matters, because I've had people be like, I heard you had a girl on 2 hours of cardio 5 days a week. Well, yeah, it was incline walking. And we were 4 weeks out and we had 7 pounds to lose. And I asked her, do you want to push the show back? And she said, so context matters. Listen, I'd love to get everybody on stage, doing 10,000 steps and eating 2,000 calories, but that's not reality. So we're going to talk about strategies. And I think I've also learned something, there's coaches in this space that get labeled as bad coaches, aggressive coaches, this and that. But even the coaches that I despise, I learned from them. I go, okay, well, they're having some success. So what are they doing? And when you work with the clients, when they leave and they come to you, I pry. I go, hey, well, what were you doing here? What were you doing there? So there is something to be learned. And there's also, from my perspective, people that decide to do bodybuilding shows, they don't want it easy. So the idea of when to be aggressive comes down to a lot of the personality of the athlete, what their lifestyle is like. I can push somebody really hard if they're working from home or they don't have a job and they're just, passenger princess types, or some people's life situations are just so convenient. My first prep, I had an office job. I worked 40 hours a week sitting on my butt. Ease to the P's, So we'll get into all those. And Lexi, well, actually, all of us had some really good competitors this weekend at the Hurricane.
Oh yeah, we should talk about, since we were all at Hurricane, we could just briefly chat about that. That was a fun show. Yeah, it was very fun, very well run. Didn't get over too late either. I think I was out of there by 9:15, so wasn't
after open bikini, because your girl was in the overall, so you were out of...
So she was, oh my gosh, I was so nervous. I was sitting there in the front and she was splitting center the whole time for the overall open bikini, and it was her and then the girl who won the overall, and Bill, I don't think Steve was there at the end, but Bill didn't even move. He moved a couple girls in the overall, but he didn't move my client Paige or the girl who won the overall. So it was an exciting weekend for sure.
Yeah. And Evan, did your girl, how did she do? I remember she was kind of center in a couple of her classes.
Yeah, I'm getting second in both of them.
Okay.
So she might be the
That's
second novice.
feedback had to just be just a little bit leaner because she had insane beauty and shape and all that.
Yeah, and a little more muscle in the glutes, obviously, which she does need. But
Yeah, so but sometimes I get that feedback, and it's amazing when you lose 3 pounds how much more muscular the glutes look, right? So like,
yeah, I mean,
so it just,
we're pushing her. You talk about when to push.
is she done?
We've been
She's still going?
no, we're gonna do class in 2 more weeks.
Heck yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, if she comes down for that, like she's going to be fighting for that title.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then I had a true novice who was 60. So she actually placed fifth in one of her classes, and she won the over 60. She was the only person in over 60, and she was kind of bummed about that. She's like, well, I won, but no one was here. And I said, yeah, but you don't know how many people started prep and didn't make it to stage. Like that's not a knock on you. And then Amber won the over 50 title. So we had a really nice weekend. But I want to say this, and maybe you guys can, it felt weird. Like, I don't know if it's because the week after the Olympia, it was a new venue. I love the old venue. Like,
Yeah, I think I don't think it really, it didn't feel weird to me. It actually, what it reminded me of is it really did remind me of Tampa Pro, just kind of how
yeah,
like you walked in, the setup, and then the booths, it
same.
just reminded me a lot of the Hyatt. But I thought it seemed like it was, I feel like open pro bikini seemed really small. That part just seemed really weird because it went by so quick.
I mean, there
Um,
was what, 12 or 15 girls? It was,
I think there were only like 10 because they brought them
oh,
out.
there were masters crossovers though, then, because there were, well, maybe there was only 2 groups. Yeah.
Yeah, there was only 2 groups. When they brought them out for initial comparisons, I just remember there were only 2 groups. So maybe
Yeah.
like 12 max, but that was it. So yeah, but I thought it was a good show. Very well run. Lots of masters competitors. I know we talked about that in the crowd, like lots of masters,
That's
amateur.
what happened about all the bodies. Remember, like it
Yeah.
was mostly masters. And I think that was the case at this show. I mean, when you're backstage with your athletes and they're lining up, what they do at this show in Florida is, so when the girls go on stage and they're crossing over, they kind of hold them in a little holding area. So the only people that are left on the other side of the stage to come out are the ones that haven't gone on stage yet. So when they get to open bikini and there's like 6 or 7 girls total waiting to go on stage, you're like, wow, it's all crossovers.
Yeah.
Which some of them can be novice, but yeah, it was a lot of masters. Like the one masters class had like 14 girls.
Yeah, and the novice classes were pretty big too. I think they only had 2 of them, but I mean, there was a decent
Yeah.
amount of girls in those classes. Oh, and you guys missed it too, because okay, so at finals, what they did, there was a bikini competitor, and they did it right before, I want to say it was like right before they did the overall lineup. They brought this one girl back out on stage, and I was kind of like, I think we were all like, what's going on? And they were like, oh, we have a special award for you. So I didn't really know like what to think. I thought maybe it was like, maybe she was in the military. They were,
Proposal.
yes, and it was a proposal. So they brought her boyfriend, or now fiance, on stage, and he was actually he had competed at the show too, and he proposed to her on stage. So they did that right before the overall. I thought that was kind of cute, and it was a really
Pretty
like,
cool.
there was a pretty big crowd too for finals, even for just the whole amateur show. I
Yeah.
mean, by the time even bikini went on, like I would say the majority of the crowd was still there. So that was kind of neat to see.
Yeah. Always awkward if they say no.
Yeah, I know. But honestly, in that case, I feel like if you were
Sorry.
gonna say no, like you would say yes on stage and then have that
Right.
discussion afterwards. But I did see them like after the show together, like off stage, and like it seemed like a legit thing. So
Oh, I'm just playing. I'm sure.
no, I know. Yeah, but overall it was a fun show, and I know I'll have my one girl, Paige, who almost got the overall. She's going to be doing Clash again in 2 weeks, so we'll see how that goes.
Heck to the yeah. So we got some fun shows coming up. This weekend is a big one, the Ultimate Grand Prix in South Florida, which is only Masters pros, so no Open Pro, but there is a show on Saturday, and then the winner of that show gets a free national entry. And then there's a natural show on Sunday, which is now you have to do a natural show before the Ben Weider. So we're going to have some really fun discussions in the weeks ahead, seeing how this natural bodybuilding stuff plays out. Yeah, I've heard through the grapevine that the numbers in the natural shows have been climbing. And so I'm going to actually probably attend some natural NPC shows and maybe there's some OCB shows and WMBF shows and just see what's going on because I'm curious. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
It'll be interesting. And I know even Atlantic Coast, which is right after Ben Weeder, like that same weekend, I know they have a natural show as well. So it's because it's like Saturday and
Yeah,
Sunday.
that one's gonna be odd though, because it's the same weekend as the Ben Weeder. So a lot of, I think what they're trying to use is these natural shows as a feeder to the Ben Weeder, solid rhyme. And then if you can't do the Ben Weeder, are you just doing it? So I'm actually going to go to the Ben Weeder, then fly down to the Atlantic coast. Because I've got some studs doing both. And so I'll be curious to see what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I almost feel like you, Paul. I got 6 people competing next weekend.
At the Clash?
For the Clash.
Okay.
Well, Clash is not this, or
Next
okay.
weekend.
Second. No, 3 days from now is the Ultimate Grand Prix. Are you going to that show, Evan?
No, I'm not going to that show.
Okay.
It's the week after. Yeah, I have 6 the week after.
Yeah, the week after is the Clash, and then the week after that is, what's the 9th? I think the 9th is the OCB show in Tampa
Yes.
that I used to
Yes,
promote.
I was people doing that too.
Yes,
Yeah,
I remember being there last year, and that is funny because I do remember you used to promote this one, Paul. I remember going when you like used to do it.
Yeah, when Daraja started winning IFBB pro shows, I was like, yeah, probably not a good idea to be a OCB promoter at this point. So I stepped back, and honestly, listen, all respect to promoting. That is a tough job. I mean, first couple of years running that show, I definitely lost money. Next couple of years, I broke even. And what's funny is the last 2 years, we started really like, making a couple $1,000s over the weekend, but the amount of effort and energy that goes into the time that it takes to build that, all kudos when I see like Tim Gardner, like how well run the Florida shows are, like, I'm excited I haven't been to one of Surge's shows in so long. So I'm excited to go to Ultimate Grand Prix. The nice thing about Florida, if you're not from here, I could not recommend more coming to a place for a show. As someone who travels all around the country and even out of the country to shows, Florida has the most consistently well-run, organized shows. Backstage crew are friendly. I mean, would you guys agree? Like, it's just,
Yeah, very friendly staff. The shows, very well run. And I think like something that I just feel like is so important is like as a coach, I really do like to put my clients in shows where it's just like the experience is good for the athlete, right? And I feel like the Florida shows, the experience is just really great for the athlete. Like I don't have a lot of clients that ever walk away from Florida shows feeling like, it's kind of a, little bit of a madhouse backstage and it wasn't a fun experience. Like I always get good feedback.
so the one reasons that Florida does so well is because so say Tim Gardner is promoting a show like this weekend at the Hurricane. Surge is here, from South Florida. He comes up, and then you've got the backstage crew like Billy. You've got the same people. So like they kind of all trade services. And Tim Gardner, when he's not promoting, is there at either as a judge or, he's helping out. And so it just really helps like the rhythm of the shows. And same thing when you go to the Clash, Sandy will be the head judge for that show, but the backstage crew will be the same backstage crew from Hurricane. So it's funny that you just get familiar with them, you feel comfortable with them, and they know how to like corral people but not stress them out for the most part. That's what you hate as a coach, when you get yelled at or your clients get yelled at. So
Yeah. But overall, fun weekend and got a couple more fun weekends coming up too.
yeah, man, the weather has changed here. It's dipped into the 80s. The humidity's kind of gone. It took a couple hurricanes to make it happen, but hey, we're here. So let's talk about this idea of when to get aggressive.
Yeah. Well, I think though, going back to what you said at the very beginning, context matters so much because you are right. You will hear some people, on social media platforms or wherever it is talk about, oh, so and so had me doing 2 hours of cardio. But what they fail to mention is, like you said, maybe it was just walking. And also maybe it was like 2 to 3 days at a time. And then we had a rest day or two after that, right? A lot of people, I think, fail to use that context. So I think context is so important in these scenarios. So anytime, if you hear a competitor say that they're doing a certain thing, there's probably more to the story to add than just like what they're saying.
Yeah. Oh, you want me to
also
brag? I'll brag. Amber, who won the over 50 NPC, didn't do cardio this prep. Ask me
What?
what she does for work.
That's a great point because she probably
No
does.
cardio prep.
Does she do, let me guess, is she a nurse or is she like,
No, she owns a bar.
oh, so she's walking around a lot.
Literally busting her butt. I don't know if you guys have never bartended. I was a bartender after college. Listen,
You're always moving.
you cannot sit still. You're changing kegs. You're running food. You're on your feet for, and I didn't say she works at a bar. She owns it. So if someone doesn't show up, she's covering a shift. So there were times where she would check in and be like down 4 pounds. And she'd be like, well, I couldn't eat. I had to just go. So yeah, like, I could sit here and be like, yeah, I had a client that never does cardio, like you do what you got to do. And if someone is completely sedentary,
They're going to need more cardio.
Yeah, that's definitely the first piece of context that I think matters the most is like just their lifestyle beyond the gym, beyond when they're stepping foot, in the gym and doing cardio, like their job. I feel like nurses, waitresses, in Amber's case, if you own a bar, like those, like people who work in a warehouse, people who are just naturally getting in a lot of steps, even sometimes just moms that have like younger kids and they're running around all the time, they probably don't need to do as much cardio just because their overall NEAT and energy expenditure beyond cardio in the gym is so high in the first place.
And also, too, it depends on the specific athlete, right? Like I have some people that can just handle a lot. They can just handle a lot. Like they can handle low food, they can handle high cardio, they feel good. It's not impacting their life in a negative way. Their hunger's not crazy out of bounds. Their blood work is fine. Everything is good. So if that's the case, those people can push harder. We always talk about genetics and bodybuilding, right? And that goes into a bunch of different things. It could be muscle insertions, but part of that is also how your body can handle certain things. Some people can just handle things better than others. And it's not necessarily a mental strength thing. It's just the way that we're built. And people can handle things at different levels. So there is nuance to all of this, right? But there's a difference between pushing somebody past the point they can handle it and pushing people to the point they can handle it. It's not the same thing, even if the numbers are the same.
Yeah, I think perception matters a lot too. Like everything is always going to be relative, but I think like a great example is like high cardio to some people is not going to be high cardio to other people.
Mhm.
I'm sure you guys have experienced this. Like, there's some competitors once they, if they're doing over 30 minutes of cardio, let's say 40 minutes of cardio, and they're, oh my God, this is so much. But there are other competitors who, are doing 60 plus minutes of cardio and they're like, I'm fine. Right. So I think perception matters a lot too.
yeah, for
Absolutely
me,
does.
this is where coaching is actually happening, where the conversations are actually happening. I'll always remember Chrissy Fenner a couple years ago was the first girl that I ever put on 60 minutes of cardio AM and PM. And I was like, we were a couple weeks out, she wasn't dropping. And this is like 2016, 17. This is years ago. I was always the coach that was erring on the side of protecting the athlete, right? So yeah, I would often have girls that just didn't quite come in right because I wasn't super aggressive with them. And I remember Chrissy was like, I really want to win this overall. It's the Minnesota show. It was in her backyard. And she's like, I want to do whatever I can handle. And I said, all right, let's do for 3 days in a row. We'll do low carbs. We'll do double 60-minute cardio sessions. And I remember going, God, that's a lot. I said, I'm going to do it. So I had a treadmill at my house at the time. And I said, I'm going to do a 60-minute AM and a 60-minute PM. And I'm going to put my carbs low. And I did that for 2 days in a row. And I remember waking up on the third day expecting to feel dead. And I was like, I feel amazing. Like, what's going on here? Like maybe incline walking isn't going to murder people, So she ended up winning that overall. And then I think she ended up getting third at her national show the next. So like, these are the steps you take as a coach, and this is the learning curve. It took me a while to learn when to be aggressive with an athlete. And a lot of it comes down to like, the updates that we're getting from our clients, the portal, those wellness scores, those are huge to me now because I'm looking at, okay, hunger is high, but sleep is great. Stress is low. So like, I'm like, okay, so they're hungry, but that hunger is a sign that your body is getting leaner, right? So I'll say, hey, can you handle this hunger? Yeah. Okay, then we're good. So a lot of it's just understanding the athlete in the big picture, but I guess let's talk about some specific scenarios where we want to push and be more aggressive.
Yeah. So, well, I think going back to kind of expanding a bit on what you said about like doing the actual coaching, I think there's been many times where, and I know you do this too, Paul, where you'll call an athlete or have a quick conversation with them to kind of understand their bandwidth too for how much more you could push, because it can be a little sometimes nerve wracking as a coach to push a client. But if you can talk with them and hear, okay, what they're willing to do and what they're willing not to do, I think that's kind of where you can start. So if I have a conversation with a client and we know, okay, we've got a couple pounds left to drop. Let's say we're 2 weeks out. We may decide to, if they're feeling really great and they're willing to do so, we're going to push pretty hard for a couple days and then maybe scale back and do a recovery day to kind of take it in phases like that of pushing and pulling. Because there does come a point where you can push too much to the point where it just becomes a little bit too counterintuitive from an inflammation standpoint, biofeedback marker standpoint. So, do we want to give like specific theoretical situations or like use examples?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I can give easy ones. Yeah.
I think giving specifics, especially for if you're listening to the podcast right now and you're like, okay, what situations have you been in where you were pushed really hard? I also want to talk about things I'm not willing to do, right?
Okay.
Or things that are like, if you got to do this, it's not worth doing. You should be maybe
Yeah,
tuning.
yeah, I definitely think, yeah, we definitely should talk about that too. Okay, do one of you guys have a specific example though that you want to start with?
Of when to push.
Yes.
Look, if we have a ways to go, and I'm a fan of pushing earlier than later. I don't think crash landing into a show makes any sense. I think that number one, it sets people up for poor reverses. It makes show day not enjoyable, especially for newer competitors. And the fact that, if you like Samson Dowd, a perfect example of this, right? Everyone gave him crap for doing a show 2 weeks before Olympia. He walked in better and he won Olympia, right? I don't understand why more people don't do something like that. Um, I'm a fan of pushing earlier than later, and I'm a fan of pushing people as far as we can push them, as long as the biofeedback markers are in a good place. So, for example, let's say I have somebody that is rating like, a 1 or a 2 out of 10 on their energy levels, and they're already at an hour of cardio and their food is low. I'm not going to crank their food down lower and crank their cardio up higher, because it's going to be counterintuitive at that point. Um, Probably a better thing to do would be to back off for a few days until that energy goes up and then continue to push down. The work's going to need to be done. That doesn't change. It's just when that work needs to go into place. And that's all based on how people feel, their energy levels, their hunger levels. But then again, that's where conversations need to be had, right? About what is hunger? What is low energy? And sometimes I need to explain that to people, because a lot of people, especially if they haven't done many contest preps, don't really know what real hunger is, or they don't know what feeling tired is. Like, there's a big difference between being like, oh man, my legs feel heavy, I don't want to do this cardio today, and I want to cry putting on my shoes. Those are two different levels. And trying to understand where they are in those levels, I think, is important.
All right. You talked a lot in hyperbole and theory, but I want you to like jog your memory of the last conversation you had. And obviously you've got a young lady that's 2 weeks out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good scenario where you go, because here's where my mind goes. I loved your idea of like, I'm much more aggressive earlier in a prep than I used to be. I used to like try to like time it just right. Now I'm like, no, let's be ready early, because if you can't get ready early, you're going to know and give yourself more time for another show. If you think you're timing it right and you don't, you miss. But you had a young lady that was not completely shredded, but has everything else. And you've got 2 weeks. So now she's fired up, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's in the zone. She just did a show. She knows her next goal. To me, that's the perfect recipe for like,
Actually, perfect example of that.
putting the
Actually,
blinders on.
Yeah. Perfect example of that. So her specifically, her food's been pretty low for a while, but her hunger's in a fine place. We adjusted kind of some of what her food looked like to be able to do that. Her cardio has already been on the higher end, with basically 60 minutes on the daily and then double 60s on the weekends. And she's totally fine with that, completely fine with that. We had pulled out the Stairmaster for a little bit to make sure we were trying to get inflammation down. The conversation we had this morning is we're putting that back in, and then if she's totally fine upping the cardio more, we're going to up that and keep the food where it is until it reaches a point to where we start to get negative results. She's totally fine. She feels good. She wants to push. I was worried about losing some muscle mass, being able to push down with keeping the Stairmaster in longer. But the fact of the matter is we tried that and we still weren't quite lean enough. So we're going to need to do what we need to do to get lean, and she's comfortable with it. So we're going to push even harder. That's a prime example of when to push, right? We have 2 weeks. Well, we have 2 weeks. We don't have 2 weeks. We have like a week and a half, right? We have about 8 days, 9 days of fat loss we can get in here, because then we got to get inflammation off, right? So let's push for these last 8, 9 days and then be able to pull back and get some inflammation off. And what you said, Lexi, makes a lot of sense, right? There is a counterintuitive point to where you can only press so far before things kind of start backfiring. But we haven't found that point with her. Honestly, with me, it was more kind of holding back on some things, trying to preserve the muscle, because a lot of this is new muscle she has added, and trying to find that balance on keeping that and not pushing too hard is what I'm trying to learn about her body as well at this point. So here's a prime example. We got like 7, 8, 9 days. Let's push hard as we can these 7, 8, 9 days, get as much off as we can, and bring the best we can.
Yeah. No, that's a great point too about especially competitors and, that are newer competitors or younger competitors and they don't have as much of that muscle maturity. You do have to be careful with how hard you push them. Because I know I've had this conversation with clients before, and I think we probably have all had the scenario where you have a client who would literally eat dirt if you told them to eat dirt, right?
Yep.
But they just want to push themselves to almost it's too extreme of a level, to the point where yes, they're going to be dropping body fat, but they're also going to be losing that fullness and that muscle, and then by the time they get on stage they're just going to look really dieted down and like a string bean, right? And you don't want that either. So that's a good point about wanting to push but also still being very cognizant and aware of keeping as much of that muscle fullness as you can.
Yeah, and look, that's the thing that I don't know, right? Like maybe this will be a little bit too much with that. I don't think it will be, because we've been doing it right now and everything is maintaining. And I feel like we can push, but maybe it might be a little much. I don't know. Anytime you push athletes to different levels on things, you learn something about them, right? That's why it's important to work with people over an extended period of time, so you can kind of learn different people. I have certain people I could run into the ground and look great. I have other people I can never do that to, or their bodies just completely flatten out, right? There is a lot of nuance to that, unfortunately. If it was just cookie cutter, that would be really simple, right? It'd be like a macro calculator. You just cut your macros by 300, eat that every day until you weigh 0 pounds.
Right. Yeah, I had an interesting scenario too. So I have a client and I know she's listening to this, but she competed a couple weeks ago. She brought a phenomenal first package to stage. But we're doing 2 more shows, and her next show is this upcoming week. So I think we've had about a month in between shows, so to say, give or take. But what was interesting about her scenario is she is a very like rare scenario. But when she came to me, she had a great shape to begin with. She's very, very young, but she had never really like trained her upper body like a bodybuilder before, but she already had like a pretty decent amount of muscle to start prep. And what we've noticed though is she has actually been, she's a natural competitor. She's been building muscle in her upper body, especially even though we've been prepping. So we knew after her first show that we needed to be a smidge leaner going into her second show. However, I kind of wanted to take advantage of being able to put on some more of that upper body muscle. So I didn't want to cut her calories down too drastically in between shows, because I didn't want to stall the amount of muscle that her body was trying to put on. So we've gotten more aggressive with food now that we're closer to that show day. But between these 2 shows, the first couple of weeks, we actually kept macros kind of more like at that maintenance level, so her body could put on that muscle, since we were observing that was happening. And that was just a very interesting case. I don't see that happening a lot, but she's just an example of somebody who's kind of going through those like newbie gains, especially in her upper body.
I got another kind of example. I started working with a girl yesterday. It's like a week and a half out from a show, and then she wants to do nationals. And I don't want to up in the apple cart right starting to work with somebody, right? Like they're already doing certain things. We got like a week and a half until the show. So I don't want to go in and just completely change everything. We can worry about that after this, right? But her cardio is high and her food is low. but her weight is moving in the right direction. Her pictures look great. She's bubbly. She's round. She's not flattening out with that. So guess what? We're going to keep riding that train right now. Now, when we start to see some things fall off, and she's asked that, she's like, well, how do you know if I'm going to end up losing muscle? I'm like, I don't. That's why we're going to keep track of everything, right? That's why we're taking measurements. That's why we're monitoring your wellness scores. That's why we take the pictures. That's why we're very specific on how we take pictures to make sure that things are moving in the right direction. But just because I looked at, I'm like, wow, that's a lot, and it was a lot. She's getting results off it. It's what she has been currently doing, and I don't see a reason to change it quite yet. Now, it's a very individual specific thing. It's very individual and specific with that. But I told her, I was like, there will be a time we can't do this anymore. I don't know when that time is, but when that time comes, we do need to pull back. It could be this weekend. I don't know yet.
Let's talk about some signs that, because like I said, most competitors, myself, Lexi, Evan, we all compete. I think we all competed within the last year. We all get summit fever. I heard this term the other day and I fucking love it for bodybuilding. Summit fever, meaning you get so close to the summit, you start to make decisions that you wouldn't normally make because you're so close. So this is in reference to people that die summiting like Mount Everest, because there's rules you follow. You go, okay, I won't go if if the weather is like this, if the oxygen's like this, if the visibility is like this, but they can see the summit. They're like, oh, I'll just do it anyway. Dead, right? And I think as bodybuilders, oh man, I'm starting to see some detail. I'm 4 weeks out. I know I shouldn't cut my fats down to 10 grams a day, but let's just try it. And then lo and behold, now you're having digestive issues. Now you're having hormonal issues. Now you can't sleep, whatever it is. Like, so those kind of decisions, it's kind of why we have coaches, right? Because we will be our worst enemies in this scenario. So like, let's talk about things that we look for in ourselves or as our athletes that are signs that you've been going too hard too long and you need to pull back.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I like that term, summit fever.
I heard it the other day, and
right.
it was something that had nothing to do with bodybuilding. And I thought, how many bodybuilders, and when I'm talking bodybuilding, I'm talking about like open bodybuilders, get summit fever and end up dead or
Yeah, I was going to throw in, I think that's a big issue with guys in the PED side of things with it. More is not always better. And a lot of times what people are starting to realize now is less is actually better, because same thing with diet, nutrition, everything. You push that too hard, your body gets toxic and it doesn't like you anymore. It'll slap back the other
swings
direction.
back, it fights you back. And yeah, the guys that do just enough to continue to grow and build and have a full season, and that instead of like, I've heard the term blasting, right, Evan? And to me, that means they're just throwing fucking everything in the kitchen sink at themselves to like maximize. I don't know that tissue is long-term. Whereas the guys that just bring it up a little bit, because you ever hear like Dorian Yates talk about his drug cycles and people are like, bull crap, because it's not enough. Well, but he trained like a beast and he did one show a year. He was consistently. So
if people knew what Samson Dowd took to win Olympia, they would swear you're lying to your teeth.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's a alpha male genetic wise, and it's also why, like, when I train with someone like Doug Miller, I'm like, this is the type of guy that if he wanted to go win the Mr. Olympia, he has the potential to do it, to look like that. Obviously, he would have to take steroids at 200 pounds and 5'9" and completely shredded. He would be 240, 250 on stage, right? Like, so like they exist. That's Samson, that's Andrew, that's Nick. Like, these guys were going to be big boys.
No matter what, they're going to be big boys.
Right. But with Summit Fever, with prep, it's this funnel of like, what else? I've literally had clients be, I'm like, listen, we've got your fats low, your carbs low, you're doing lots of cardio. What else can I do? And I'm like, you just have to give it time. It's not like we can't do 3 hours of cardio and 0 fats. And, this is where, I got a couple girls I'm talking to right now who've been with a coach, no carbs for weeks. And they're struggling mentally. Right. So like,
And this is the point too, where it's like, we'll get into this. I think we should get into this towards the end about what we're not willing to do. But this is also where that like concept of a healthy body as a responsive body comes into play. Like if your
Yeah.
body is not responding at these crazy extremes, rather than asking like, what more can I do? Maybe take that as a sign of like, hey, I need to take a step back because my body is not responding at this extreme, crazy protocol. This is, that may be a sign that there's some other things you need to work on, right? But I feel like the issue, like kind of feeding into the summit's fever, is I feel like the issue is as competitors when we get so stage lean, when we're talking like a couple weeks out from a show, super dieted down, we're super fatigued, we have a hard time thinking in the long term, right? I think that's where a lot of people like they just do what they want to do in the moment and they do it and it may get them that instant like dopamine and that instant gratification, but it kind of bites them in the butt, 3, 4 weeks later, right? So I feel like that's why so many athletes, even coaches, like we need coaches because we can't really put ourselves in thinking in terms of that long term. We can kind of only think about like what our brain is wrapped around and consumed upon in that moment.
And that's what makes us competitors. That's the difference between somebody that's like, I just want to get in shape, or when someone's like, I want to get as lean as a bodybuilder. I just don't want to get on stage. And I go, well, then
Okay.
you'll never get there. Like
No.
it's the psychology of getting on stage is what pushes you through the next 10 pounds, because you're not stage lean until you're really lean. And then you realize you still have 10 pounds to go. Like it's not a fun, comfortable place to be. But what drives us is that competitive desire. And that's the game changer. And then that's where you have to have some perspective. You have to have somebody that's in your corner. I know, Evan, you coached yourself. I coached myself last year. I did it more so because I was going to do it on my own terms. I was going to diet down and pick a show when I wanted to do a show. I think you kind of did it more as a self-experiment, right? Like you just wanted the
Yeah,
fitness.
yeah. The girl I was with at the time was competing, and she's dieting, so I'm like, why not diet too? I was kind of stuck in one of those things where I needed a little bit of motivation as well with it. I've been in off season for a while, and I felt like it was a good thing, and my weight wasn't too far up. I mean, I only ended up losing like 14 pounds to get on stage, so it
Yeah,
wasn't like I had a long ways to go. I mean, I could do the same thing right now. I mean, I could probably compete in 9 weeks if I wanted to with
right.
it,
Actually,
without like a
same.
ton of effort, right? Without a ton of
Yeah.
effort to do that. So it was just kind of a place I was at, and I wanted to try a few things. I want to be able to support her at the same time, and everything just kind of ended up falling in. You were going to end up doing the show. One of my other friends, Scott, was going to make his
Yeah.
classic debut at the show. So I was like, well, this is just kind of a perfect time. We could all do it and have fun together. So that was kind of my
Yeah,
thought
but
with it.
you and I would meet up and
Hmm.
pose and go, and so you get an idea of, okay, where am I at? What am I looking
Yeah.
at? And I coached Lexi last year through her prep. And I'll say this, like anybody that's worked with me, after working with Daraja for 6 years, she probably knows what I'm going to say before I say it.
Yeah.
But it's about that process of going, okay, checks and balances, right? And you lose objectivity. The one thing I'll say about competitors, the leaner we get, the better we look in prep, the worse we see ourselves. And the way I correlated it last year dieting, last year wasn't so bad for me because I didn't put pressure on myself. I just enjoyed it. But what I notice is in the improvement season, like right now, if I go in the gym and I get a pump and I go work and I pose, I'm like, ooh, my abs look nice. I can see some veins. When I'm deep into prep, all I see are, oh, there's this little pocket of fat here. And man, did I lose muscle somewhere up? Like you only see the things you need to improve. So there's
Hmm.
like this mental switch that flips. And that's really where that idea of summit fever, or, you know, you can do more harm than good.
So
Yeah.
the thing we were talking about too, right? About what are some things to look for to pull back, right? When that kind of where we were going at
Yeah.
Yes.
with
Signs that
this,
you probably
I'm
have been
pushing it
going
too
too
far.
hard.
I think the first one that comes to my mind would be the heaviness in the legs. Like I'll be the first to admit with cardio, I sometimes like have like my preferred, if I had to choose my preferred type of cardio, I love cycling. However, I have to realize that in prep, especially deep in a prep, that is not always going to be what's most beneficial for me. Yes, it probably burns a lot of calories and it's I think it's kind of fun to be able to like, I don't know, I like it better than other machines. However, that when I like a sign that I always look for when I know, okay, I need to back off of the bike and strictly just focus on like elliptical or incline walking is when my legs start to feel really heavy, because then that feeds into my workouts usually not being so great. And generally I take that heaviness in the legs as like, okay, I'm kind of inflamed and my body's probably not recovering as quickly as it should be.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I personally, kind of the way I think about prep is it's yes, it's calories in, calories out, right? There's our other thermodynamics. We can never get around with that. So how do we create that? I personally would rather do it with food than try to do a bunch of movement on top of it, because it's way easier to reduce calories is to burn them, right? At least I feel like it is. I think that a lot of times helps with the recovery as far as the legs are concerned. But look, the case in point is most of the time you need both, right? Especially if a lot of athletes have a long way to go with it. And unfortunately, a lot of coaches, like, shoot, I had a consultation yesterday with a girl that just signed up. The coach said because she was natural, this girl is 5'4", she needed to get to 165 pounds in her off season, and had to
What?
pull and had to pull 40 pounds off of this girl in a prep, which is like a crazy amount to pull off, and then she wasn't stage lean, right? So, a lot of times if situations like that happen, yeah, you're gonna have to really, really end up pushing somebody. But the heaviness in the legs is part of it. I think that's a time to either not necessarily even get food up, but to pull back on the movement, give a little bit of rest on that, or maybe change the modality. And you can talk about that, right? Like, what are you doing for your type of cardio? A big one for me is it's a combination: energy low, hunger high, and sleep gone to crap.
Yeah, sleep
You
is a good
get those, and then another could be digestion too, right? Digestion. That's one that can kind of throw in there too. But a lot of times too, deep into prep, digestion is never going to be amazing for most people. So that's kind of a variable in there that we can try to just do our best to maximize. But if sleep is garbage, energy is low, and hunger is high, that means we're probably not going to get much movement. We're probably not. So a lot of times that's when, okay, let's pull that foot off the gas just enough to where we can push again. And that just enough is different for everyone. Sometimes it's, hey, we need like a burger and fries and a day and a half of rest. Some people it's, you need 50 more carbs for 2 days.
hmm
So I think the first indicator to me that rest and recovery was good was, early on in my coaching career, what would consistently happen is I would have an athlete, get him to stage, and I always used refeeds, like I said, but, probably, didn't take maybe as much recovery. I also had a lot of people doing hit cardio. That was very much in vogue when I was prepping. I was used my first prep. I think at the end of prep, I was doing 3 days of hit cardio plus 2 leg days. I was a bodybuilder. So I'm talking like 25 sets of legs where you can't walk for 2 days and doing 3 days of hit. So there's just no lower body recovery. And so, as I first started coaching, I used a lot of hit cardio. So looking back now, I realize that's another thing that's going to really impair how much you can recover. And what I would notice was like the week of a show, you back the cardio off, you bring the food up, because I came from the natural bodybuilding world, and that's what we all did. Nobody in the natural bodybuilding world was doing these, crazy protocols in peak week. It was pretty standard, to feed into the shows. And then the athlete would do that. We'd get on stage, we'd do a show, and then we'd go back and prep. And 2 or 3 weeks later, they'd look completely different. They'd be down 2 or 3 pounds, where we couldn't even drop a pound for the weeks leading into the show. And then, I had a light bulb moment. Why in God's green earth am I waiting till the show to give them a show-like week? And then this is when I was talking to Eric Helms in Australia, when we were doing a tour with Lane. And he was like, yeah, there's this research that just came out about diet breaks. It's called the Matador study. And the Matador is MATADOR is for metabolism, adaptive thermogenesis. But it's, and they basically had 2 groups of people that dieted for 16 weeks. However, one group dieted 16 weeks straight. And this was done very specifically per individual, created the caloric deficit, created their plan. They dieted for 16 weeks and they lost a lot of weight. They had a second group that dieted for 16 weeks. However, it took 34 weeks for them to complete the study, because they would be in a deficit for 2 weeks. then at maintenance for 2 weeks, right? So they were dieting, maintaining, dieting, maintaining. So basically every 2 weeks they were at maintenance. And again, maintenance is adaptive. And a lot of people think like, oh, you know, I started prep at 3,000 calories, so my diet break would be 3,000. No, your diet break is going to be 20, 25% more calories than you're on at that phase. It's not your old maintenance. Your metabolism, the human body is super dynamic. So these scientists were actually adjusting their recovery phases throughout this process. The group that dieted for 34 weeks still only dieted 16 deficit. They lost more body fat, kept more lean body mass, had a much better metabolic rate. And guess what? When they followed up with those people a year later, guess who had kept more fat off? The group that was taking the breaks. Now, getting people to buy into a 2-and-2 plan, they're probably not going to do that. However, competitors, if you give them 1 week of recovery, it's a complete game changer. The diet break has been the single greatest tool that has happened in my coaching career, because no longer do competitors get to stage and feel exhausted. Now, the first couple of times I tried this with people, they thought I was crazy. They're like, what? You want me to do less cardio and eat more food for a whole week? And I'm like, well, it's not like that much more food. It was like basically their refeed calories. And I'd cut their cardio in half. And right away, people started dropping weight during these diet breaks. And they're like, I don't get it, coach. Why can I eat more? And even I didn't fully understand the mechanisms behind it. But now looking back, you go, well, think about what happens when you bring food up and cardio down. That inflammation goes away, right? You were talking about heavy legs, Lexi. A lot of that's edema just built up. Your digestive system speeds up, so you're burning through food faster. Some of your hormones that have been severely compromised, they start to tick up a little bit. So you might actually be improving your body's functions more than you're bringing the food up. So it's like this weird little place you can get. Now, I will say the leaner you get, the more successful diet breaks are. Don't be 2 weeks into prep, down 1 pound and be like, oh, need a diet break.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make.
That's the point I
Like
want to bring up,
yeah, everything that we're kind of discussing about when to pull back, generally these are going to be, you know, mechanisms that we're using very deep into the diet. I mean, you can do these things early on in prep or early on in a dieting phase, but there's going to really be no purpose, right? So these are going to be all things that generally we're doing is, you know, we're almost to show day and we're at that level of leanness and we're in that depths of that grind.
And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Paul, because this is at least the way I implement it, and I'm assuming it's the way that you do too with it, is diet breaks are needed when they're needed and progress is stalled. If everything is cranking and weight is moving and everything is looking good, and someone may be tired, but if everything is going great, I don't necessarily think that's the best time to pull back and do a diet break. When things stall, that's when you need it.
Momentum is huge.
Yes.
Momentum. The only time I'll do a diet break when momentum is good is if we're like 6 weeks out and I'm like, oh, you are freaking lean for 6 weeks out. Let's take a recovery week. Even though you don't probably need one, I don't need you to be stage lean for 4 weeks. Right. So that's the only time, but absolutely. And, you know, like I say, like diet breaks, they don't necessarily matter until, you know, for women, you're probably 15, 14% body fat. For men, you're probably 9 or 10 or under. Like that's when you start to get some value out of them. And then the leaner you get, you know, there's this thing Dr. Joe used to call the metabolic building phase. When you're stage lean, you can reverse your calories up to off-season numbers if you do it right. And it sounds wonderful. You're still starving because you're shredded.
It's hard. It's hard too.
Yeah, and it's mentally challenging because now you're eating a high volume of food and you're like, man, shouldn't I be suffering? But you know,
and a lot of times you're hungrier.
Yeah, the hunger doesn't go away. The food volume helps, but you know, this is where you can really keep an athlete super healthy. I think my favorite example was Lana. You know, if you told me I was going to have an athlete do 13 shows in a season, I was like, you're out of your mind. There's no point. But after we got done with 2 or 3 shows, I think our lowest carbs for the year were 200 and the most cardio we did was 30 minutes for the year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. And so she's eating 300 carbs and a burger the night before the show. And then the day of the show, she's eating normal. And then she's traveling home. We're back at stage weight on Monday. We're not even, at that point we weren't even dieting. So but that's because like competitors are, it's almost like we're working with people in a lab.
It is.
They're so meticulous with their diets. You can't really do, when diet breaks, the term diet break is used by like a Gen Pop or a lifestyle client. It's a little, I have to be like, hey, I know it's called a diet break. I need you to just treat it like prep. Prep your meals. This isn't like, oh, I'm on a diet break. Cool. I'm going to go to,
It's basically a break from the deficit, or a break from.
It's a deficit break.
It's a terrible name. I wish we could figure out a new name.
I call it pulling back. I don't even call it.
I call it a recovery week, but then I have some people tell me like, am I doing something wrong? Why do I need a recovery week? And I'm like, no.
Oh, I've had that too. And I think that is that athlete mentality where, people, I always tell my clients all the time, for competitors, you have to remember the judges don't care and will never know what you did to get on stage. So I think some people fall trapped to this, like, okay, well, if I push harder and harder, like I'm going to feel like I'm rewarded more on stage. And that's not the truth. Like, it doesn't matter what you did to get from point A to point B. All that matters is how you show up and how you look. And oftentimes with these strategic like diet breaks or refeeds, competitors tend to just look better on stage. They look fuller, they look healthier. There's more pop to their muscles. And also like, people who are dieted down way too much, or, there's no diet break, no refeed, and they're just, it's grind all the way up until the show. Sometimes too, if you step on stage and you have that inflammation, especially like in your lower body for females, that inflammation, it's kind of like a film of water, and it kind of quote unquote like fuzzies out the lines too. So you're not going to probably look as lean as you could just with that subtle inflammation on your lower extremities.
So here's a good example of this. I actually had a conversation with one of my lifestyle clients. He eventually is going to move into prep. He started in prep, but now it's more for like a photo shoot situation we're working with. And his food has been low and his cardio has been high for a while. We haven't got a lot of movement. This week, we've had a lot of movement, like a lot. He's dropped like 4 pounds, and he moved the shoot back another week. So now we have an extra like 2 weeks to get there. And he reached out and he's like, hey, can we move into maintenance here for this week? Because I'm losing weight quickly. I'm like, after all the times that we've pressed to get the weight to move, now that it's finally moving, you want to pull back? Now's not the time to pull back. If we need to do a recovery day or maybe a refeed for a day, but his suggestion was going to maintenance for a week. I'm like, we only have 21 days and you want to pull 7 of those out at this point, when we're just now getting movement. No, now is not the time for that. So I think this will be valuable for a lot of people because yes, 4 pounds, almost 5 pounds in a week is a lot of weight to lose, right? But again, we look at weekly averages over that time frame. He has not lost at this rate at all. It's more like maybe a pound, half a pound a week up until this point. So now's not the time to pull off when everything's working.
Yeah.
No, and the indicators for me of when to be really aggressive, and my favorite aggressive approach is 5 days in a row and then 2 days of recovery. That's my most common. I will sometimes go 7 days in a row and 2 days of recovery. But it just depends on the person. And if we're doing something like that, I have to hear from them. I can't just go a whole week. But if we're going to be aggressive, what I need to hear is like, I need to hear from you. I need to hear your voice. I need to know that you're still enjoying the process. You're getting good sleep. These are the things that to me, and I've been enjoying the Aura ring. I don't know, Lexi, do you wear one of those?
I don't, but I've had some people talk about them, and I've been curious and tempted. I would just get one just because I'd be curious like about my sleep.
It's great. It's a great device.
So the thing that I've been noticing with my athletes is I used to not understand fully when females would hold water in their cycle phase. I now fully know it's during the ovulation phase because I'll say this. I probably had 4 or 5 clients check in the last couple of weeks. Coach, I look leaner. I feel leaner. The scale's up 2 pounds. I go, do you happen to wear an Aura ring? Yeah. I go, tell me when you're ovulating. They're like, oh, it's now. How'd you know? And I go, this is what coaches do. We start to pay attention to trends. And this is something that I've noticed. And it's just so mentally relieving for someone to go, oh, okay. I know I've been doing everything right, but listen, you can, and even me as a coach, there's been times when I was dieting last year and I did everything right. I went to bed light. I was going to wake up and hit a new low, and the scale didn't hit a new low. And you're just like, it almost ruins your day. So when you get that, and I've also had that moment where I went, why is the scale up? And then I went, oh, I forgot. I added something with I added a bunch of hot sauce to that meal yesterday. Like, that's how in tune we can get with our bodies.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I feel like I always get to the point where, I mean, not always, because there are some days in prep that prove me wrong, but like I can just feel when I wake up before I even step on the scale, like if it's going to be up, if it's going to be the same, if it's going to be down. Like every once in a while, it'll throw me off, but you can just like feel when you're, dropping weight or when you're going to hit a new low. Well, let's talk about because I do want to get to this a little bit. Let's talk about some of those scenarios, like you mentioned a little while ago, Paul, about things like as coaches that we are not willing to do when it comes to pushing. Because I think we've all
Yeah.
had those clients that are like, oh, barely like they're doing everything like we should be doing, and we're pushing really damn hard, and they're like, oh, well, like what else can I do? Can I do more? And there does come a point where, okay, if we have to push harder, we probably need to not be in prep and need to pull back and listen to whatever it is that the body's trying to tell us.
Yeah, I think one of the things, if we're looking see, specifics are kind of difficult at this too, but if we are pushing somebody very, very hard for say 3, 4 weeks in a row, and then we pull back and weight spikes up, that's typically not a great sign for things, especially if we're further on in a prep. I don't think any of us will go no fat, no carbs, protein only. I don't think any of us will say, hey, you need to fast for 2 days. I don't think that is a thing that any of us would recommend
No.
doing. I don't think saying you need to walk 35,000 steps a day is something any of us would recommend doing. And I don't think any of us would say you need 2 hours of cardio every single day for weeks and weeks and weeks on end.
No.
I think those are all things that are commonplace in a
Oh,
weird
yeah.
way.
Well, I think some of those things that are commonplace, I think, are lazy
They don't
coaching
work.
practices where
And they
they're
don't
like,
work.
right. And that's why when we talk about being aggressive only works if you recover.
Yeah.
Right.
I use a term when I do my presentations, when we're doing seminars, called the chronic inflammation syndrome. And it's this phase of the human body where it doesn't make sense, but you can't get leaner despite, like, I swear you could eat 0 calories and do 3 hours of cardio and you won't lose weight. And it's because your digestive system, your central nervous system, your muscles, everything is so inflamed. It just shuts down calorie burning. And, how many times have we said, like, oh, I'm just going to go out tonight and take a night off, and you have a burger and fries, you wake up the next day down 3 pounds, and you're like, what the hell? You kicked everything back on. You
Yeah.
established a new baseline.
Well, and
And I
with
think
working so hard for so long, I think what a lot of competitors deep into prep, I mean, you realize it when you really think about it, but you don't always realize it in the moment is, I mean, you're going to the gym, you're doing your cardio, your body gets really damn good at conserving energy. And like even the littlest, simplest things that like require just energy expenditure, a lot of times you're not going to do. Like I remember years ago, I just remember vividly having this memory, like being in prep and I have like my trash chute in my apartment. It's down the hallway. It's not that far. And I just remember one night I was like, oh, I really need to take the trash out, but I'm just going to do it in the morning. Like I didn't even have the energy or bandwidth to want to walk down the hallway and take out the trash. And that happens when you're pushing so hard, is like you just don't move outside of everything else you're already doing. And your NEAT is so low.
Yeah. And I think something too that we're trying to talk about with this is we're trying to protect not just your metabolism there, because yes, your metabolism can downregulate at times. We're not just trying to protect that. We're trying to make sure that your thyroid is still going to be functioning at a good rate too. Because a lot of times if you push food like to exceptionally low levels and cardio way too high, your thyroid will downregulate. And unless you're going to be getting a bunch of blood work and supplementing thyroid medication, I don't recommend going that route with things. There's a smart way to go about it to avoid any of that stuff. A lot of people will do that for in place of the lazy coaching, right? Like, yeah, we're going to cut all your food. We're going to cut all this stuff out. None of this is going to happen. And then we're going to supplement all this thyroid medication to make sure all that's still running too. And that's, yes, will it work? Sure. Will you be miserable? Yep. Will you rebound like crazy after prep? Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing, the rebounds after prep. That's like, as a coach, and I think we're all in the same boat, like we're willing to push clients, but also I always like to, like, sometimes clients, they'll want to push, but they're not thinking about how that's going to impact their post show. I think that's where a lot of times, like, having a coach can be so valuable, because a lot of people just want to push themselves into the gutter. They get on stage, they do great, but then those are usually also the same people that they have a whole slew of issues after getting off stage, whether it's binging, whether it's their like body just blowing up, their internal health markers being off. Like, those are a lot of things that in the moment a client can't really think about. And I think that's our job as a coach, to always set somebody up for success and find that fine line between pushing them, but also not pushing to the point where it's just going to backfire and cause a whole other slew of issues post show.
And I don't know about you guys, to speak for myself here. I know which clients are going to have the issues post show. I already know, and I try to prepare them for it. I do my best, and it's the ones that are willing to do anything to get there, started a long way or had a long way to go to begin with, really want to push hard, willing to do anything. I've had a few slip ups in prep with a few binges here earlier on at the beginning, but have done pretty well. Unfortunately, even we can do our best as coaches. Like I say, we're like car GPSs. We can tell them the directions to go, but we're not Uber drivers. We're not picking them up and driving them there. We can do our best to set them up for success there with that. But it's hard as a coach to be able to balance that, right? Like, they want to look good on stage. They've done everything they possibly can, and we want to push them to do that while still trying to let them know this is going to be incredibly hard post show. And it's almost like watching that train bear down on them, and everything we can to pull them off the tracks. We can't always do it. But it's that type A personality. It's that all or nothing personality.
Yeah.
Right.
The kiss of death for me, Evan, for years, I struggled with this, because I'm like, man, I would say probably close to 50% of my clients after the show struggled with checking in, confidence, weight gain. This was before I instituted a lot of the diet breaks and the linear loading where food is going up into the show stuff. I think I've eliminated 99.9% of issues post show now with that approach. But there are still the clients that are like, okay, let me do what I want to do. The kiss of death for me is they're like, hey, coach, I'm not going to check in this week. I just want to eat intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's hard. I think, yeah, if there's one thing I, wish I just want to get across to anybody considering competing, it's like, I get that sometimes by the end of prep, you do feel like that, maybe a little bit of that burnout from tracking, and you feel like you want or you need a break from the numbers. But truthfully, that's going to open a whole other can of worms. And like, you have to really think about it in the standpoint of, you need to think of the like first 4 to 5 weeks post show as being just like prep. Like, it's not, okay, the show date and then you get to kind of do whatever you want and have a break. Like, you really want to think about those next 4 to 5 weeks as prep, if you want to set yourself up for a good long-term reverse. But yeah, that's hard.
I'm going to say something here that will probably get a little kickback, probably a little negativity on this, and I don't know if y'all will agree with me here. But here's the God honest truth. You can get away, if you're show lean, you can get away with pretty much anything for about 2 to 3 days post show. You can get away with pretty much anything.
Yeah.
But getting back on track after that is almost impossible. You could eat 10,000 calories for 2 days, and as long as you got back on track, within a week, you'd be totally fine. Totally fine. But being able to flip that switch and get back is so incredibly difficult, because that ghrelin response is like, you have this hole inside of you. You try to fill with food that will never be filled ever. And you try to fill that up a few days and it still doesn't work. And you're going to keep going down that route. And that's how you end up 20 pounds over your stage weight a week later.
Yeah.
Not from that day or two. It's from the 7-8 days of it.
Yes, that's the key. It's really hard. You dig yourself deeper and deeper into this
Yep.
hole. Every day you fall off track. And not to mention, if it's a lot of food, like hyper palatable food, you know, that's addicting. Like your dopamine is through the roof. You're getting those quick dopamine hits. And like, I mean, those foods are addicting and it becomes really hard to climb out of that hole eventually. So no, I agree 100% with that. Yeah. Is there anything else? Because I'll have to wrap this up in a few minutes, but is there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on that we haven't touched on when it comes to when to push, when to pull? And, you know, we kind of covered some basics of things that like we're not willing to do as coaches and also why we're not willing to do those.
Yeah,
I,
I think we got to wrap up here. I think we got a few minutes left, right? We got somebody message me.
Oh yeah, that was me. I have a call coming up, so I do
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
wrap this up in a few
Yeah,
minutes.
so
But I
so
feel
I
like
think we covered a lot of good. I love this topic though, because I think,
do.
especially for newer competitors, people think pushing is bad and people think pushing to extremes is bad. Nothing is bad. Nothing is bad or good, just like food. You can do a lot of really hard pushing for short spurts. And please understand that too. If we pull back on you, it's not because we don't think you're tough. It's because we're
Right.
trying to push you forward. It's like, even if I have girls on 6 low days and 1 little bit of a high day, I'm like, we need, and a lot of them won't even want to take that high day. I'm like, we need to take this high day. Trust me. Trust me. That's why your weight has been moving down. If we keep it at these low numbers forever, your weight's absolutely going to stall and you're going to be super frustrated. We're not going to get to stage and you're going to not know why. And this is why.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why, like I said at the beginning, that's why we have a job. If contest prep and getting lean was as easy as just decreasing your macros, upping your cardio every time you hit a plateau, we wouldn't have jobs. Everybody would be able to prep themselves, right? But it's not that simple. It's, you know, especially when you get down to the thick of it, those last couple weeks or last month or two of prep, that's when, you know, these recovery tactics that we're talking about in short spurts really, really become important.
Look, so some people it is that simple. Push their food down, cardio high, natives respond, they're
Some,
full as a house, and those are genetic elites, and every one
well,
of those
listen, Evan,
are
I wouldn't
just
even say
not
it's genetic
normal.
elites. I would say that's people that have never dieted before.
yeah.
Like my first prep, I think I made 2 or 3 adjustments over 20 weeks. You know, your body is different, especially if you prep back-to-back seasons. Last year
Yeah.
I dieted down and I ended up winning my class at an NPC show for my age category. And I was in the top 4 even for the open. Now I'm just not as muscular as these mutants, but my prep was a breeze. It's been 3 years. I remember being like an hour of walking every day and just, you know, pulling back some food here and there. And I was stage lean. So like when you are metabolically healthy and normal, prep is so much easier. When you're
It is.
back to back dieting and you're doing a show to spring and the fall, you know, and I've even had girls be like, wow, I thought you were really good at this, but last year I was eating so much food and doing hardly any cardio and dropping weight. And I go, but you got 35 pounds on a body in 2 months. You are not the same person you were last year. Like I don't love low calories and high cardio. That is not I just do what is necessary.
Mm-hmm. And the one thing I'm going to recommend on everyone here, and this is just a thing for all of prep, the leaner you can be at higher calories does not mean that your calories are going to be high during prep. It means we're able to diet for a longer period of time and the result will be better. So getting your food up without a ton of body fat sets you up for a good prep. But if your food is high and you got a ton of body fat, it don't mean it's going to be easy either. So there
Right.
is that fine dance there.
Absolutely. All right. I think that's it. I don't know. We talked a lot about this. I think we can take some feedback from this one and talk about topics because we're in the home stretch. There's some big, you know, the national show, the Ben Weider show. There's some big events coming up, and I've got some rock stars coming out swinging here towards the end of the year. I know you guys got a bunch of people doing Clash next weekend, so we'll do some show reviews. Yeah, maybe maybe we'll do a little.
I like it. Maybe we'll do maybe we can do a Q&A next week even too. We haven't done one of those in a while. So,
Too cool. All right, let's do it.
all right. Bye guys.
Thank you for listening to the code. Go give us a like and a comment and a whatever. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment.